How many all-pro players will the Miami Dolphins be trading before or maybe after next week's NFL draft? We'll discuss that here on Dolphins in Depth, podcast provided to you by the Miami Herald. I am Miami Herald columnist Omar Kelly. Joining me is the infamous Barry Jackson, the man of mystery, the man of many beats. Barry, you have attended a lot of Dolphins pre-draft press conferences. This is Chris Grier's 10th, because this is Chris Grier's 10th draft. Obviously, there was one major topic that stole the show. I'm not even sure we were even able to talk about draft prospects or draft players or the draft class, because it seems as if we're done with another elite player on the Miami Dolphins franchise, a player who they just compensated last year. Jalen Ramsey is on the trade block because the team just decided, you know what? This is just not working for us, Barry. How do you make some sense of this?
Well, today, to me, if you're a Dolphins fan, was a profoundly sad day, Omar, because this basically signifies the end of what had been hundreds of millions of dollars spent on a 6-year rebuild. This was supposed to be year 7. This was a point at which Stephen Ross and Chris Grier and everyone assumed they would be a championship contender. And instead of building a team, they are deconstructing a team. And even though Chris Grier says they're not rebuilding, they're not retooling, let's call a spade a spade. This team is being broken apart, not necessarily by their choice. They didn't want Calais Campbell necessarily to leave, although they didn't want him enough to offer him as much money as the Arizona Cardinals did. Teron Armstead, obviously, that was his decision to move on. And with Ramsey, even though he did not ask for a trade, it's obvious by the use of mutual decision that this is something that Ramsey wants, whether he formally asked for a trade or not. So they've gotten appreciably worse from a team that finished 8-9 last year. And to me, it's sad because Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel were entrusted with this rebuild. They were given really an open pocketbook, an open wallet to be able to spend whatever they wanted, as many draft picks as they wanted to trade. Anything they needed, Steve Ross gave them over the last 7 years. McDaniel, obviously, only for the last 2. What do they have to show for it? No playoff wins, 2 playoff losses, multiple December collapses. It's a sad day. And you sit here today, Omar, and I'm trying to be measured and level-headed about this, but you sit here today and say, is there ever a light at the end of the tunnel for Dolphins fans, or will we forever be paying? Will Dolphins fans forever be paying for the unbeaten season? Is this simply karma and you're due a full century of ineptitude and poor results?
Oh, Barry, I think it's more to do with being built on an Indian burial ground than actually the 72 season. I grew up in that neighborhood. I know exactly what that dirt is. Listen, as I wrote in my Miami Herald column, you know, I've always heard but never fully understood the term "rats off a ship, sinking ship," and I never got it because I'm like, how do rats know the ship's sinking? Like, you know, can rats swim, Barry? Do you know for a fact that rats can swim?
It's unconfirmed.
This is just something that just makes no sense, but it's just so commonly used. But it's the only way that I can justify what's actually happening to the Miami Dolphins. There is a Miami Dolphins player group chat that fans and coaches and executives are not part of. And it sometimes includes former players and sometimes includes present players and, you know, position groups. I mean, I'm sure there are many group chats. From what I am told, these group chats are going off the chain and back to free agency, back to how they're building the team, back to the jettisons of leadership. And it is just mind-numbing in terms of the level of discomfort and uneasiness that a lot of people have about this organization. And it's not just the fan base. And I am of the opinion, Barry, that when they came to the end of the season and Steve Ross didn't have a level of comfort in terms of firing everybody, but decided to stay with everybody, I felt like, okay, this was not a bad move. This was not a bad decision. From this standpoint, I didn't think the team gave up on them, especially the way that they rallied back from the season. I thought Tua's injury factored into a lot of the issues that they were having. I thought the offensive line's ineptitude factored into a lot of the issues that they were having. I thought injuries, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb's absence factored into some of the issues that they were having. But good God, Barry, I am at the point where it's hard to have confidence that this can be fixed, because I don't think that there's confidence within the players that this can be fixed. And it reminds me a lot of, I believe it was the 2015 season, Joe Philbin's last year, where eventually Dan Campbell replaced him. And basically the players came into the year not believing and played like they didn't believe. And I wonder, is this what we're destined to? And is this team going to be ultimately handed Anthony Weaver? And then we go through the circus and the rigmarole and, you know, and all of these things. But, you know, I went into this press conference, obviously knowing that Jalen Ramsey, something was up and with the intentions of asking about it. However, they beat us to the punch by, I believe, leaking the information the morning before his press conference, which I understand and I get. But what I don't get and I don't understand, and it doesn't make any sense to me, is why you're portraying this as if Jalen Ramsey doesn't want out. Why is
this being portrayed as a mutual decision? Because there would be no justification, no logic behind the Dolphins wanting to initiate this move. So we're left to conclude, based on logic, that this is something. Hold on.
I can give you I can give you one little piece of logic that could make me say maybe. If Jalen Ramsey did not buy in, did not say I'm going to participate in the offseason program, did not cooperate with management, and basically said, I'm not buying into what you're doing. Obviously, then you got to move on from him, because you can't have a veteran player, a leader, allegedly, supposedly poisoning your locker room.
Well, then it's not formally a trade request, but then we're just parsing words, Omar. Then it's clear that he doesn't want to be here if he says he's not going to participate or any of our other hypotheticals. But what's clear is Chris Grier has said repeatedly, you can never have enough corners. So you can't tell me this is the Dolphins' idea to trade an all-pro corner when they already cut Kendall Fuller previously this offseason, when they have no one on their roster beyond Ramsey other than Caden.
Didn't address it in free agency.
Cam Smith, who we have no evidence can play at all. So this, to me, is going to be a rebuild, a retooling, even though for whatever reason Grier did not call it that today. To me, the only encouraging thing that I heard today was two things. A, Steve Ross, according to Grier, is not ordering pulling back spending money. So that's a good sign that he hasn't decided, I just don't want to spend in free agency anymore, because when he has a GM who knows what he's doing, then spending is a good thing if they're able to nail the correct players. The other thing that I was a little encouraged about today, Omar, was the fact that they are going to be active in post-draft free agency. Grier said this is the best group of street free agents still left. Got some names for you.
Please, share the names.
Any hope. If you're trying to latch on to any hope.
Please, share the names.
Salvage. No, I want to make this point. Your hope would be this. You nail your top 3 draft picks. You get another pick for Ramsey. You nail that one. You emerge with 4 contributing players from this draft, immediate contributors, 3 of whom will start. And then in late April, early May, you choose from a group of players, including Zadarius Smith and Jonathan Bullard, to establish good starters who could replace Calais Campbell, a cornerback from a group including Tre'Davious White, James Bradbury, Asante Samuel, Mike Hilton, a good slot corner from the Bengals. There's still guards out there with like Dalton Reisner, and Isaiah Wynn. So there are players out there where if you cannot fill all your needs in the draft, then you can plug and play some of these other guys. That's the only sliver of light that I see. I could see them piecing together a team that's good enough maybe to be 9-8, something in that range, if Tua's healthy the whole year, if Tyreek gets back to what he was, maybe 10 wins, best case scenario. So I don't want to be Debbie Downer entirely on the show, even though I think it's a sad day, because I do think there is a very, very, very narrow path, but they have to nail all their picks, and then they have to get 3 of the 5 or 6 best street free agents left after the draft, and then maybe you have a team good enough to compete with the Chargers in Denver and Cincinnati for one of the last wild card spots. No? Am I being too optimistic? Is this entirely a disaster?
Listen, Tua's delivered winning seasons with less during the Brian Flores era. No run game, no offensive line. no wide receivers, no offensive coordinator. He's won. And I'm not putting this all on Tua, and that was a lesser experience Tua. So I'm not saying that you're out of the realm of you're crazy, Barry. I'm just saying it's clear that this is a rebuild. I don't know why they can't just acknowledge that, because I really don't see anything that they've, you're basically, having a fire sale on your team.
Well, not Tyreek.
Yeah, not Tyreek, because according to Grier, unless you're offering him 2 first-round picks, Tyreek's not available. Sure. Here's the thing that doesn't make any sense, Barry. Just hear me out on this. If we were going to argue about who are the top 4 players on the Miami Dolphins team, we'd say Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Zach Sealer, Tua Tagovailoa. Am I missing anybody?
No, that would cover it probably.
Okay. So you're basically, one has already told you he wants out. Then he said, my bad, because, he realized there was no out because you took money. The other, he took money, didn't tell you he wants out, but all of a sudden you're done with him. You mutually decided that this isn't going to work. You got a quarterback who you haven't heard from in weeks because, for whatever reason. He every time he leaves his house, people want to mock him because, he looks fat, or he's out of shape, or he's at a party, or he's living his life. Now his house is for sale. And then you have, who am I missing? Oh, Zach Sealer, who basically is like, give me my money. This is a hot mess, Barry.
It is. And I have to lay a lot of it at the feet of Steve Ross. And for all of the good things that Steve Ross does, spending money endlessly, having a first-in-class organization, having one of the best facilities in the league, this ultimately falls on him. He is the custodian of the franchise. And to me, one of the big mistakes he made was he put too much importance in a GM and coach communicating well. And yes, that's important, but he placed that at the top of his list of things that were important. When he fired Adam Gase and made changes, he said, I need a coach and GM who get along. Now, it's good to have
how many bad relationships have we had, Barry? We've had a lot of bad relationships.
Should not be top on his list. What should be top on his list in evaluating who runs his franchise is who makes the best personnel decisions. Why have we never heard out of Steve Ross's mouth, what? I need someone who makes consistently good personnel decisions, like Howie Roseman. We've never heard those words. That's at the root of everything. You look back at 2 decades of mistake after mistake, and the one with Ramsey, even though I don't blame Grier a lot for this, because it was a gamble that I think had merit, but ultimately it was a mistake pursuing Ramsey and some of these other high-priced players instead of investing in your own picks, Wilkins, and Ginkle, Rob Hunt.
The F1 picks era.
Yes. And I can certainly understand the gamble. I'm not going to second-guess Grier for that. There's plenty other things that's fair game to second-guess Grier for, including Van Ginkel and Noah Igbenogany and Cam Smith and obviously the Josh Rosen trade and on and on and on. But in this case, unfortunately, it turns out to be a gamble that did not work because they invested in disgruntled guys who were unhappy elsewhere with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey. And Ramsey's always a sourpuss and in a bad mood, with all due respect. And they did that, sacrificing good guys who were in their building, who they could have kept with Wilkins and Hunt and Brandon Jones and Andrew Van Ginkel. So some of their best draft picks, they let walk out the building to keep players who, while certainly some of them are on a Hall of Fame track, they are malcontents and they do come with baggage. So that ultimately will be part of the epithet for Chris Grier's career here. But it's amazing to me that he would embark on this retool without any assurance from Steve Ross he's going to be taken care of. I have to think that Grier knows deep down Steve Ross is always going to take care of him, whether he'll remain GM for life, whether he'll be promoted to another job upstairs, because no GM in his right mind, after an owner publicly says the results are not good enough, is going to embark on this kind of rebuild and clearly and intentionally reduce the quality of the team. Now, I have to bring this up because I want your opinion on this. You know, this question has been on my mind the entire offseason. I wasn't certain of the answer. I want to hear it directly from Chris Grier. So I asked today, why in the world did they not restructure Tua, get an immediate $19 million, and spend that money early in free agency on the top defensive tackle, the top offensive lineman, and try to build the best trenches you can do? Grier's answer to me was so telling. He said, we didn't feel like we needed to do that, which says to me that there's no conviction internally that they're not good enough in the trenches. They feel like, oh, we'll take care of it in the draft. We know they're good defensive linemen, offensive linemen in the draft. We'll take care of it later. But there's never been a priority with this organization to go out and build the best trenches they possibly can and use all the resources to do it. There were $19 million sitting right there to be able to go get a Jonathan Allen or sign another offensive lineman of high quality, and they decided not to. Now, I know you would not have done it. I would have done it because to me, that's the only way to compete with teams with elite quarterbacks.
Those players didn't necessarily want to be with you, Barry. And I think that while you might like the hot girl in the club, she might not have interest in you. And I have my concerns about when you have so much exodus from player standpoint. And I know Chris Grier said something like, oh, a lot of these guys wanted to be with us. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, show me who wanted to be with you. Maybe we'll see it in the third round of free agency. But right now, I think it's important to hear a little bit from Chris Grier in terms of assurances that he's been given from Steve Ross, and also where he feels like he is in terms of the ability to address the voids on the roster from the draft.
No, Steve has never given that. Steve wants to win, like we all do. And he's a fantastic owner that wants to do and wants badly for the Miami Dolphins to win, as we all do. For us, it's in a salary cap era, you just can't keep when you have high-priced players. And you've seen it around the league, the other teams. So you make decisions. We have 10 draft picks this year for the first time with that many draft picks. So excited about that. But at the end of the day, we were just looking to sign some good players at prices that we felt comfortable paying, and that continues all the way through the draft and post-draft. We've been in touch with a number of players as well still that we're still tracking.
How would you evaluate your draft history, the three biggest positions in the league: corner, defensive tackle, and guard?
I think defensive tackle. I think Christian's probably the biggest one. Last time we went early on a guy. I think we've drafted a few guys mid or late, been okay. But Christian is probably the biggest one. Corner Xavier is probably the best one that I've drafted. We've had a lot of success with some late round guys and like Cater Crow, who's undrafted and stuff like that. Cam Smith needs to come through at the end of the day. He's got to stay healthy and be on the field. He has shown some flashes, but this is a very big year of him. He knows what's expected because he can't hold his hand and wait for him anymore. And offensive guard, I think the last time we really went were Austin and AJ. Austin and Rob Hunt, sorry. And Liam. They're probably the last three we drafted, and they've all been players that have helped us win games here. And would I say perfect? No, I'm not. I said no GM is perfect, but working with our scouts and our coaching staff and what we're doing and the scheme that they believe in and finding the fits for players is always important. And it's been a pretty smooth process the last couple of years.
Now, I will say this, Barry. There was some things from Chris Grier's press conference, and I wish we didn't have to focus so much on Jalen Ramsey because, in your 10th draft, you should be good at your job. I think, just a guess, Barry. And I asked Chris Grier, you've been at the helm of this. Even before this, you were director of college scouting. The draft is supposed to be the strength of what you do. What have you learned about this yourself in this process? I think Chris Grier is very good when it comes to executing trades. Now, will they have to end up with a 4th or 5th round pick for Jalen Ramsey? Probably, just because you're not going to get what you paid for him, which you paid for a 3rd. But when it comes to the evaluation and talent and procurement of draft picks, it hasn't always been good, Barry. It hasn't always been bad, but it hasn't always been good. And it's hard to evaluate him because of the series of drafts where they lost first-round picks or traded away first-round pick. I continue to beat the organization up because when you're sitting here with Jamar Chase staring you in the face and you can tell he's going to be an elite player, don't trade down and then trade back up and then take what the hell is his name? The wide receiver. You know who I'm talking about.
Jalen Waddle instead of getting Chase. They traded back and got Waddle later in the draft at 6 instead of staying for Chase at 3. I agree with you on the trades. I would say there are exceptions. Obviously, the Rosen trade was a mistake. But to me, this has been a case of a general manager who's been barely adequate at times, but has simply made too many mistakes. You look at cap mismanagement too, and this falls also on Brandon Shore to an extent, even though he's been able to do a lot of good things. They're going to be having on their cap this year, 16% of their entire salary cap is going to be allocated on corners who will not be on the team. Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Kendall Fuller. $46 million on your cap for players who are not all the team, so who are not going to be on the team. So it's a combination of cap mismanagement, personnel miscalculations. Obviously, coaching plays a role as well. McDaniel certainly holds some blame for not creating an atmosphere where players were fearful or respectful enough of him and felt like they could be tardy for not being able to generate more of a deep passing game last year. But this all comes down to bad personnel decisions. That's been the consistent theme of 25 years of ineptitude for this organization. It's continued with this regime. And the mystery, Omar, is not that they continue to make mistakes because the people in charge obviously have a history of making mistakes. But the mystery to me is why Steve Ross tolerates it. Why is he the most patient person on earth? And I wonder some days, is he so preoccupied with trying to build West Palm Beach into a new Mecca, which is good. This is not a criticism. This is his new mission in life as an 84-year-old man. He's looking to build West Palm Beach into a new Mecca, very much like Boca Raton or Palm Beach County, and you admire him for that. Any 84-year-old man who works on a project like this, you have to hand it to him. And he's philanthropic and does wonderful things, but the mystery to me with Steve Ross is this. He knows the things that fans say. He knows what you and I write. He's aware of all of the valid criticisms, and yet he tolerates it, and he keeps giving his GM another chance. And again, Chris Grier is not a terrible GM. He just hasn't been.
Wait a minute. At what point were you going to fire Chris Grier? Hold on, Barry. Let me challenge you on this. At what point were you going to fire Chris Grier? When he had 11 win, when the team delivered 11?
No. After he picked Charles Harris instead of TJ Watt, after he screwed up with the Rosen thing, that would have been the time to make a change and say, Chris, he wasn't even in charge. You're a good man, but I need someone more consistent with personnel moves. But instead, he's given him year after year after year. But Chris has done just enough to keep his job. He's given credit for finding players like Kader Kohu. He's found acorns every year. He made good moves with Connor Williams before he got hurt, with Aaron Brewer, with Jonnu Smith. So again, Chris Grier is not a terrible general manager. I want to make that clear, and he's a good man as well. But he just hasn't consistently made enough good decisions, in my mind, to justify continuing to be in the position, or at least not sharing the position. I don't see
the window of opportunity that you're creating now in your mind. He wasn't even in charge back then. Mike Tannenbaum was. Yes, he was.
No, he made the Rosen trade. Mike Tannenbaum wasn't around in that post-Tannehill era.
Okay, that was 2019. But Charles Harris was not 2019. Charles Harris was 2017.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to turn this into a Chris Grier bashing session. Everyone does that enough. He's tried the best he can. It just hasn't worked out. So to me, today the blame from my standpoint is more on Steve Ross than Chris Grier, who's made a share of good moves. Ross, however, with any team, with any franchise, it falls on the feet, Omar, of the steward of the franchise, the custodian of the franchise. That is the owner. And Steve Ross has consistently made bad decisions in terms of his hires, and he's shown no urgency in recent years to correct them. So this has to fall on his feet for all of the wonderful things that Steve Ross has done with this franchise and has done as a human being and a successful businessman. This ultimately falls on him. And frankly, it feels, I don't want to say hopeless, because as I said, there is a path, or maybe they could win 8 or 9 games this year. But if the goal was to turn this team into a championship contender, or even a team that can win a playoff game, they've miserably failed during this rebuild at that, and I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. They have to execute draft picks at a level of perfection that virtually no team can, and that they certainly haven't been able to do, to even be able to be in the mix for a wild card spot next year. So that's why I think it's a sad day for Dolphins fans, because you realize that instead of taking one final swing at this, trying to compete with Buffalo and Baltimore and the top of the AFC by keeping Calais, by hoping Teron Armstead stayed, by pursuing high-level guards in free agency besides James Daniels, by pursuing a defensive tackle, by signing Byron Murphy, another corner, early in free agency. Instead of doing all of that, you've let all of this talent go out the door over the last 15 months, including Wilkins, Van Ginkel, Hunt. Obviously, Ramsey is going to be on the way next. So instead of trying to seize on one final year of the Tyreek Hill window, you've thrown your hands up, you've given up for whatever reason, and you're about to embark on a retool, whether they call it that or not.
Is it going to be good enough even if you did make that swing? And would have been in a lot of wasted money, a lot of wasted resources.
Do not agree. If you add Byron Murphy to this team and the top defensive tackle out there, whether it was Jonathan Allen or someone else, and another capable starting guard alongside James Daniels, you would have had a team that at least would have been a wild card team. And who knows, if Josh Allen tears his appendix or something, God forbid, you would have had a fighting chance to at least be able to compete for division title. Now what do you have? You have a bottom 6 team in the AFC, one that frankly would be surprising if they're in the hunt in late December, because as I said, it will take every decision being right from this point forward. And what team makes every decision correctly?
While I hear your point, I have to disagree with you from this standpoint. Mike McDaniel needs to have some accountability. If you run a country club organization, and an organization which I argued on their behalf about player empowerment, when you empower players and they feel like they can run the asylum, and like I wrote about it last week, everybody in the organization walks on eggshells around Jalen Ramsey. Rightfully so. He's a grumpy man. Yes. And you see the reasons why they walk around eggshells around Jalen Ramsey now, because obviously, whether he wants out or not, he's out. And for whatever you could get for him, whether it's a 24-pack of Coke, it's like in my mind, and I sit here and I calculate this. Because there's one thing that I take issue with. It's about the press conference. Oh, Jalen didn't ask for a trade. Okay, you got to preserve his trade value. Fine. You just paid Jalen money. You just paid him money on top of money. And now you come back a year later, even though his performance hadn't dropped off, you clearly know you're not going to shake him down because Jalen shakes you down. So what is this about then?
Right. It's clearly Ramsey's decision. They paid Jalen Ramsey a $5 million roster bonus on March 16th. So you're going to sit here and tell me that the Dolphins want to move Jalen Ramsey? Of course not. He's clearly unhappy, whether he officially, quote, asked for a trade or not. He clearly was the one who initiated this and does not want to be here, because teams do not trade high-level cornerbacks if a player does not privately make known that he would prefer to be elsewhere. There's just no other explanation for it. Now, as far as the precise reason, is he unhappy with Mike McDaniel? Is he unhappy with the scheme? That will remain a mystery for now. It will probably come out at some point in the weeks ahead. But anyone who thinks that this is the Dolphins' decision, needs to have their head examined. And for Grier to say today, trading Jalen Ramsey makes us a better team now and in the future is kind of insulting to the fan base. He said now and in the future. I don't know why he would say now. He could have just said long term. This is in our best interest. I just wish there would have been more. And again, it's not a big deal, but I wish there would have been a little more leveling with the fan base, saying, look, we tried our best, didn't work out. We're going to retool a little bit, do some things differently, and see if that works out long term. But instead, he's stuck to the script, which is we're going to win every year. This year is no different. And I know all coaches, all general managers have to say that sort of thing. Even the Marlins have been saying it before a season where everyone knew that they were not going to be in contention. So this is just how GMs and coaches talk, but it's really not leveling with the fan base, because anyone with eyes knows that too much talent has left the building. Look, they have 4 players who have been all pros on their roster. I checked. Bradley Chubb has never been an all pro. Of the 4, 3 are going to be gone. Teron's already gone. Calais is gone. Jalen Ramsey's going to be gone. Who do they have left? Tyreek Hill. And for people who have been on Neptune today or in Antarctica or wherever, let's just tell people a couple other news things from today's presser. The Tyreek news was that they are not shopping him. As Omar said earlier, Chris Grier said maybe if the team offers us 2 first-rounders, we'll move him then. A couple of other notes from today. They're going to be active in free agency after the draft. Patrick Paul is a starting left tackle. They're not bringing in competition. They said they like Larry Borum, who was one of the worst pass blockers among all NFL tackles the last 4 years, gave up 7 sacks and a very limited number of snaps last year. For whatever reason, they like Larry Borum. And then also I asked, is Liam here as a starting guard, or is he here as your backup center and a swing guard? He kind of suggested it's going to be as a backup. I also asked him about safety today. I said, are your starting safeties in the building, even though none of the 4 have ever been long-term starters? Ashton Davis has started 24 games. Ife Melifonwu has started several games for Detroit when he wasn't injured. He was injured most of the time. And obviously they have Patrick McMorris, Elijah Campbell as well. Grier said that the starters will come from that group, although he left the door open. If they took Malachi Starks out of Georgia, or the South Carolina safety, or Xavier Watts, or Winston from Penn State, I wouldn't be shocked if they come in and start. So those are some news notes I wanted to share with people.
He also said they are not in the market for a first-round quarterback. That is
exactly. So Tua is our starting quarterback. He said Zach Wilson, they felt fit this offense well. So that was one other takeaway from today. I asked, is Kohu playing boundary? Are you projecting him as a starting boundary corner to replace Ramsey or Kendall Fuller? Will he be in the nickel? He said, we don't know yet. He's a Swiss Army knife. But he then put Cam Smith on notice. He said, Cam Smith better deliver. We're not going to hold his hand anymore. He needs to deliver. And what I find interesting with Grier is this. When mistakes are made or questionable moves are made, Grier publicly will put the onus on the players. When Tua signed the contract extension and then got hurt, Grier did not say, maybe we made a mistake by giving him so much guaranteed money after just one healthy year. Instead, Grier came out on the attack, kind of against Tua last year, respectfully so, and said, look, it's, quote, unacceptable to us that Tua doesn't protect himself. And he did something likewise today in a different kind of way with Cam Smith, Omar. Instead of saying, that pick just hasn't worked out yet, that's on me. We like Cam Smith's talent. We think he might have a future. He's got put together. Instead, he totally put the onus on Cam Smith and said, he's got to deliver. We're not going to hold his hand anymore. So that says to me that Grier believes all of these decisions are right, and the onus and the fault lies on the players, not on the decision to draft Cam Smith, but on the fact that Cam Smith should be a better player. He was the right selection, and this is all on Cam Smith. That is the inference that I make when Grier goes on the attack respectfully against these players, too, as well. Never once did he say, maybe we made a mistake by giving Tua all of that money based on one healthy season. Instead, the entire narrative of the January 8th press conference, January 7th press conference was Tua has to protect himself. That is on him. So I find that interesting.
One, they protected themselves on injury front with the contract with Tua. So it's not like injury was out of their mind, because they did protect themselves from an injury standpoint. I did find it very interesting that Grier said that we have to be careful about the kind of player, the mental toughness, the maturity that we have, because a lot, and he said this, and I was shocked. This is information he was volunteering. Some of these players struggle mentally and struggle with criticism. And this is not something that's new or foreign to me. I believe Adam Gase was the first one that brought it up to my attention when a 340-pound man wanted to beat me up for criticizing him, for being lazy. But
JP are the initials, but I won't go further.
But it's a new era. It's a new era of players, NIL era. Barry, you don't feel like the coaches are being nice to you. You feel like somebody else is offering you more money. You want to transfer, right? You don't you? The University of Miami is facing this right now. Well, NFL, it doesn't work like that. Well, allegedly, I guess Jalen Ramsey feels like it worked like that. Unless you got clout and power, you can't transfer every year. So I think the onus is put on Cam Smith from this standpoint. There's a lot of maturity that needs to happen with Cam Smith. We know he has the ability, he has the talent. It just has not produced on the field. He has to grow up, as do a lot of players.
Are we sure he has that much talent? I mean, from an athletic standpoint, he's obviously very talented, but he did allow 19 completions and 23 targets against him. There's difference between talent, which he has, and being a good NFL player. I don't think there's any evidence that he's a good NFL player.
Maybe.
Okay,
that's fair. That's fair.
He might have it in him because he is talented and he does seem to take it seriously. Obviously, he got called out by Brian Zucker.
Does he seem to take it seriously? What
for not
evidence
being
do
in
you
enough
have?
shape. No,
What
I
evidence?
think he takes it. I think he wants to be successful. He's talked about studying tape more. I don't think he's a guy who's just leaving the facility and partying all night, from my impression. So I think he wants to do well. You can tell it bothers him when it plays poorly, just standing in his locker, talking to him for 10 times or so last year. So he wants to do well. He wants to do the right thing. But is it in there? And the other question is this. Do they even gamble on projecting him as a top 3 corner last year, now that they're at a point where it doesn't look like they're going to contend? I guess maybe you have a different answer to that question now. Maybe now you can say, okay, we can give Cam Smith more snaps and see what he has, because we know secretly we're not going to be a contender for much of anything this year. So maybe we can get away with throwing Cam Smith out there, right?
I don't know, Barry, but there are a lot more questions than there are answers, and unfortunately, we've got the draft next week. Well, not unfortunately, but fortunately, we've got the draft next week. But we don't have any answers right now, Barry. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Obviously, Chris Grier's press conferences are up there in the YouTube. You can find it on the Dolphins website. I encourage you to go check it out so you can hear from the man himself. On that note, we will be here all week giving you draft material, getting you prepared for next week's draft, which kicks off Thursday. We will be back for another episode later this week. On that note, Dolphins in depth, we are out.